Director General for Internationalization of Science and Innovation in the Ministry of Science and Innovation of Spain. And I have the pleasure to moderate this first panel of today, that it is related to monitoring. We are going to have the opportunity to discuss on all the different aspects of the exercise that are developed in the context of EOSC in terms of monitoring. Before to start, I want to give you just a question that is in relation with a problem that it looks happened yesterday. There was an exchange of bags in the venue, in the dinner venue. It looks like someone take the bag of another person, and the bag that and we have the bag in the organization. So if you you know about that, please tell us in order to recover your bag and to send the bag to the correct person. So with this, we go directly to the session, and I am going to call the first speaker. The first speaker is Gareth O'Neill. He is EOSC Future and EOSC Observatory principal consultant on open science in Technopolis Group. And he's going to talk about monitoring EOSC and open science. Gareth, the floor is yours.
Let's see if the slides work. Now they do. Bear with us. So good morning to all of you. While the slides are coming up, I hope you're all well. I hope you enjoyed the dancing last night, not too late. I'm taking the laughs there with those of you who were. Okay, and this is up. Can you see the slides? Now you can, and let's check they work. Yes, they work. Okay, good morning. I will keep to my 10 minutes, so I'll do my best. We'll talk today about monitoring EOSC and open science. Specifically, the work I will talk about is the work we've done in EOSC Future, developing the EOSC Observatory in close collaboration with OpenAir and other colleagues in the project, as well as with the members of the EOSC Steering Board. The EOSC Observatory, what is that? So this is essentially a policy intelligence tool to track policies, practices, and in the future impact of EOSC in open science. And you'll notice that we put these two together, EOSC and open science. I believe Pilar might come back to that later on, but at least when I'm talking here, we really are talking about both policies and practices for EOSC and open science. They overlap, and both are taken into account here. Now at the back end, this is essentially a survey tool. So a tool to run surveys, to collect data, for now to collect data from the member states and associated countries, so the representatives of the countries in the EOSC Steering Board, where they can come in, they can see the surveys that are there and then start filling them in. And it's also on the front end a tool or an interface to present the data to both the Steering Board internally and then to the public when that data is opened. And the idea here is to open up the data in these annual cycles of the survey every year. And this is the survey on national contributions to EOSC. So in that sense, it's a tool to support the monitoring of the EOSC landscape, let's say, to support the EOSC readiness at the member state level, and to support their contributions, both in kind and financial, to EOSC open science. And it's also intended here to help with the survey fatigue that's going on. Many of you are filling in surveys left, right, and center. So the idea here was to start trying to align surveys, align questions, and ensure that many of the representatives at member state level and in the countries are not filling in the same surveys or filling in surveys at the same time, as well as to collect data and use cases and support the mutual learning that we have here. And this is moving on. If I sketch very simply the monitoring ecosystem that we see, and I'm pretty sure it's more complicated than this, we have at least 4 layers sketched here. Number 1, monitoring the EOSC readiness at a member state level. So there are indicators in place now to start monitoring the EOSC readiness, and that's exactly what I will talk about here, what we've been doing starting off in the observatory. We then have layers 2 and 3, which focus on the EOSC partnership and focus on the activities of the EOSC Association. You'll hear a little bit more about that from Ilaria. And here we see that there are indicators to monitor the EOSC partnership. This is through the KPI survey, for those of you who are filling that in. And then the third layer here, we have contributions again to the EOS partnership, but this now in terms of mostly financial contributions, as well as the activities. And this, have I reversed that? No, that's correct. And this is the additional activities plan. So for those of you, again, who are filling that in. The fourth one is kind of a catch-all. There are many different policies and practices out there in the ecosystem, such as under the EOSC projects or under other relevant Horizon projects or under individual institutions, research performing organizations, research funding organizations. So this is capturing the wider EOSC ecosystem. And again, we will focus just for now on this first layer. And I think we will also hear a lot more about that from Roberto in the next talk. Let's go ahead. So just to give you an idea what this looks like on the back end, because you won't see it on the back end, it's essentially a very simple interface for the surveys. The EOSC Steering Board members log in. You'll see my login on the top right. Incidentally, they use the EOSC infrastructure, EOSC AAI proxy infrastructure. I hope I've got that right. To identify themselves and get authenticated and authorized to use the tool, so it recognizes them. They log in one time, they accept the policies, and then from then on, it's a quick click to get into the tool. Once in, they can see the surveys that have been run and are currently running. So in this case, they will see the survey that ran in 2021, and they will see the survey that has just finished in 2022. They will also be able to see all of the data from their colleagues, so they can look across surveys, and they can, of course, see their own responses. Now, when the survey is closed, there's a brief check on all the data, and then it's locked once validated, and that data cannot be changed. There can be exceptions made, but in principle, the data then stays as is in the tool, and the data is backed up, also put onto Nodo. Now, the front end is somewhat different because we have two versions of this. So for the first survey, which was essentially a pilot survey on national contributions to EOSC 2021, we ran a string of questions. We were testing the questions, testing the tool, testing the results, and this resulted in the first data set and first report and analysis of the questions for 2021, and this is the interface that you can now see online. So you can access these questions, you can access the data, you can engage with the visualizations there. We have, in the meantime, updated the survey. A new monitoring framework for national contributions to EOSC was created with the EOSC Steering Board. That has now been translated and implemented into a new survey, building on the questions from the first survey, building on the experience from the first survey. The questions have been tweaked, let's say, clarifications have been given, so further clarifications on how to interpret the questions, and that data has been collected. Just to note, in the first survey, we collected 34 validated responses from both member states, associated countries, and other countries. And for this second survey, the national contributions to EOSC 2022, we collected 32 responses. So again, a relatively high response rate. To be very honest, the survey was quite long, was complicated. I think many of the members of the steering board needed time to fill that in. That's something looking forward for the future on how to address this, but again, quite a high rate. The interface has been updated, as you can see. More visualizations have been added, more analyses have been added, and this data set and the analysis of this will be published around the start of October, and you can find that all online. Now, we've tried to work in an open manner as much as possible, and that's essentially been two main ways. We've opened up all of the documentation, or at least all of the relevant documentation for the observatory in a specific community we created. This is called the EOSC Observatory Zenodo community, Zenodo, which is quite usable for everybody. So all the documentation is there that we have. There will be more coming. We have more reports coming. Essentially what we do here every year on an annual basis is a survey is created, run through the tool, and it is immediately PDF'd and published in Zenodo, so it's findable for everybody online, so you can see the questions that are being asked and the clarifications. Then when the data has been checked, validated, and closed, the data set is immediately also published in Zenodo and linked to the survey so you can find it, and an analysis is then run on the survey data for that year, again deposited in Zenodo, all under CC BY, and linked to the others. So you will typically get a triad of digital files every year for this annual survey. So I welcome you to go ahead and have a look through the documentation there. And we've also opened up the software code. So again, the software code is openly licensed. It's available on GitHub, so you can see there past versions, and where we currently stand. And there, I believe, we have 6 repositories for the observatory, given the different components of the tool. And again, you can find this on GitHub. Just to close up, I welcome everybody to scan the screen, go ahead, play around with the first interface, and the new interface will be coming, I think, around the start of October, together with the analysis of the report and a download of the data set, both in Zenodo and with the visualizations in the tool. And I will stop there and give you a little bit more time.
Okay. Thank you very much, Gareth. If we don't have any burning questions to Gareth now, yes, please.
Just a very quick question, Gareth, out of interest. Has anybody made use of those data sets in Zenodo for independent research on EOSC?
To my knowledge, not independent research, but the Commission has already used it for the NPR expert group, the National Points of Reference. So the NPR group released a report, I think, in 2019, with specific, let's say, targets to set for not EOSC, but more for open science or open access to publications and research outputs. And the idea was to update that report this year. So rather than go release yet another survey and go through all the member states' data again, they decided to use the data from the first results of the survey 2021. They were also given access to the analysis of the data that's currently now ongoing, let's say, and that has been used as a guidance for their new report in, I believe it's 2023, Pantelis, is that correct? So it has actually already been used internally by the Commission and member states themselves. But the open data, I've not yet seen it used. I do know on the data set and on the analysis, there's been quite a lot of downloads and views on Zenodo, but I can't track yet what they've been doing. And nobody's reached out to say, great data, we're using it.
Thank you. You have a question? Okay.
Thanks, Gareth. Who at national level did you collect, who did you ask to collect data? RPOs, institutions, ministries?
So this is the prerogative of the member states. So what we have done from the project side is we run the survey through the tool. The member states go into the survey tool and they fill in the survey, and then how they collect their data is essentially up to them. My understanding is that there can be many different ways that the data is collected. You may get a specific example, for instance, from Ireland, if Roberto has time to explain how that works specifically for Ireland. But it's the representative of the member state which takes that forward and then gets that data that they need for the country. And then they validate. Not to say that all countries validate. Some may fill in or not fully make it because the deadlines are not that long. So we only show the data that has actually been fully validated by the member states. And again, that's not that they answered all questions, but simply the questions they answered.
Sorry to interrupt, but I think that we are going to have opportunity to enter in depth in all these questions. And with this purpose, I call to the stage to our second speaker. Our second speaker is Roberto Sabatino. Roberto is EOSC Steering Board member on behalf of Ireland, and he's a Research Engagement Officer in HEA Net, Ireland. Please, the floor is yours.
Thank you and good morning. So yes, hopefully I will answer your question during my presentation there. So first of all, I just wanted to go through how we developed this, the set of questions that are being asked by this survey. And it was really an iterative and collaborative approach between the EOSC Steering Board members, EOSC Association members, and the EOSC Future project through Gareth and other colleagues. Because there are several stakeholders involved in developing these questions, because multiple stakeholders are interested in the answers. So that's why we had this iterative approach through a small working group, but then the approval of the whole set of questions that went to the whole steering board. And this took several months to get to the bottom of, primarily because we wanted to make sure that the questions that we asked were clear, that they could be answered, and that the answers were useful. Because in the first survey that we did last year, we didn't always hit that mark. We didn't always meet that target of having clear questions, answerable and useful answers. This time, I think we have made great progress on that, and I will talk about this shortly as well. The other thing we were very conscious of was dealing with survey fatigue. We all know that we're bombarded with surveys, so we wanted to make sure that this was comprehensive and that there wouldn't be too many repetitive surveys coming the way of people who need to respond to them. So we came up with a short survey of more than 100 questions. But I will say that I think it's very well structured. And once you get into the swing of things, it's actually quite easy to answer, even though it's 100 questions. It just takes a bit of time, but it's not difficult to do, I think, at least. That was my experience with it, at least. So, yeah. So this is the structure of the survey. And again, the 104 questions that were there come from this table that you see here. It's divided into 3 parts. There are the areas that we are examining, so publications, data, software, etc. And then we look at policies. So are there policies in place at national level? And how many organizations, so research performing organizations or research funding organizations, have a policy on X, right? Open access to publications, policies on infrastructure connecting to EOSC, and so on. And then the second part is all about practices. So how much has a country invested? How much has, is there monitoring in that country on implementation of these aspects? How much was the country investment in these aspects, and what use cases were there, and more. So these all added up to 104 questions, right? But very well structured, so you could also target who needed to respond to what question in some cases. Oh. So timings, we launched it in February, and we got the responses in Q2 this year. Some of us managed to do it in Q1. And preparation of the presentation of the data, we're expecting to do it in Q3. We were hoping to be able to present more detailed data here today, but we're not in a position to do that yet. But there is some qualitative data I can show you, which is quite interesting, I think. And so on to the next slide. Yeah, so getting the answers. This is in answer to the question that was asked earlier. It is really the responsibility of the EOSC Steering Board member to get the answer to all these questions. But how they go about it really depends in each country. So, for example, in Ireland, some national level questions, I was able to go to one person and I will get those answers. So, is there a national policy on open access to publications? That's a yes and no question, and there was one person who would answer that. When it boils down to how many research performing organizations have that question, have that policy, there is no one body in Ireland, and I think this repeats in several other countries, that can answer that question. So you really have to go out to all of the organizations and ask them, do you have a policy on, and then you add it all up, right? So that's what I did in Ireland. I went out to about 30 organizations asking the same questions, and then I added up the responses. Now, in Ireland, that's not too difficult because we are a small country. 30 organizations I had to deal with is fine. Germany, maybe not, right? France, maybe not either, right? So, so that could be a challenge for the next iterations of the tooling and the questions to look at that. So, yes, and also within an organization, different people were involved with different questions. So, when it came to data management, it would be one group of people in the university, and when it came to open access, it could be a different group of people. So I had to work my way through that. But we managed, right? Next slide. So I'm going to focus now very quickly on two aspects. One is the investments, and one is the policies at national and institutional level in the country. So looking at investments, which, yeah, this picture here shows how much countries have invested in EOSC and Open Science in 2021. And you see that most countries that respond to the survey are in this area. Sorry, I'll do it over there. Where can I do it? Here. In this area, can you see this? Yeah. In this area down here. But there are a few outliers who are way outside that, right? And this is interesting. Why are they outside there? What are they counting that these guys are not counting? Were the questions understood, right? Clearly. So looking more into this, if we look at this area here, we see that this is what the picture looks like. So one country said 24 million, two other countries said around 11 million, and then the boxes tell you pretty much what the others have answered, right? And how many countries have answered there. So that's an interesting picture without putting names to these numbers, which is very important at this stage at least. But it shows you the range and the distribution of the investments in the various countries. What does it tell us? Well, what have we learned more so than what does it tell us through this process? That the questions were clear, in my view. They couldn't really be answered fully. And in fact, I think all those numbers that we have gathered, I think my personal opinion is that they are underrepresented. They are underreporting what the actual investments are in country. This is because if you look at universities, for example, universities in Ireland at least, I think this happens in other countries as well. Talking to my EOSC Steering Board colleagues, they have the similar experience, that universities have two streams of funding. They have core funding and research grants. The universities control how they spend the core funding and know what they have spent it on. So they can know, I have spent so much on open access, I have spent so much on data stewards. When it comes to research grants, the university's offices don't see that. They don't have that data. They go to the funders. And the funders don't track the funding. All they say is it's an eligible cost, but they don't add it up. So there is a lot of investment which is not reported because it's not accounted for by the funding organizations. Right? And this happens in several countries. So despite what I just said, we do have a good indication of the investments that are taking place, and we need to also look into why we see these differences in those countries there that I said. I need to speed up because, yes. Policies, this was easier to answer than the investments because it was at a national level, it was primarily a yes or no answer. Do you have a policy on X or Y? When it came down to how many RPOs have that policy, again, you had to go to each organization and ask that question. And there, the answer wasn't always clear because there could be, in some cases, a clear document, a clear policy document. In other cases, there could be a statement within another policy document. Is that a policy? Some said yes, some said not really. So there's a bit of grey area there. And some countries have a really top-down approach where it is mandated at national level and it filters down to all the organizations. Whether it's implemented, that's a different point, right? But anyway, we found this a very useful question because through asking this question every year, we can see how this evolves over time, right? Which is very important, I think. So this picture here shows the national policy on open access to publications. And it shows you there in blue who has a policy and where the green dot is if that policy is mandatory. If there's no green dot, it means it's not mandatory. So you can see here quite a big uptake of national policies in open access. When it comes to the next picture, and I don't show how many organizations have a policy within the country, right? At this stage. Oh, please, I'm nearly there. This one here shows policy on connecting repositories to EOSC, right? So few countries have a policy, and even fewer have a mandatory policy. But what's good here is that there's room for improvement over the next years, and what's good also is that we know that repositories are connected already to EOSC in many cases. So the picture isn't really as bleak as this suggests, because in reality things are happening, it's just that we don't have yet national policies in place in the countries, which should improve things when it's there. And I think I'm just going to make it. Yeah, so how did we do? I think we did very well. We set these goals here. Questions clear, answerable, and provide useful information. I think we met that target for the most part. Now, there are clear areas for improvement, and yeah, we are analysing the responses as we speak in the last week, and the next week we'll be going into depth, looking at the responses and seeing how we can improve the survey for next time. So, thank you.
Thank you very much, Roberto. We go directly to the next speaker. Our next speaker is Ilaria Nardello. Ilaria is EOS Association Senior Policy Officer, and she's going to talk about the EOS Partnership Monitoring Framework, the survey results, and impact case studies. So the floor is yours, Ilaria. Where's the time? Time is going to
There. No, coming later. Okay. All right. So I'll try to. Yeah. So good morning, everyone. And so we're discussing this side of the monitoring of the EOSC partnership. The association, the EOSC Association, has reporting duties, monitoring and reporting duties towards the Commission regarding the evolution, the development of the partnership. And so we will try to take you through these exercises and see what the results that we now have, what they're saying. So not only the monitoring and reporting of the additional activities that the members of the association contribute, and not only the monitoring framework key performance indicators for the partnership, but also the inventory of case studies or examples of practices that can be collected through the EOSC Association members. And going forward, what should happen or what could happen. So just a brief introduction to allow you to understand or gauge, let's say, the burden of monitoring that the EOSC Association needs to absolve in order to be compliant, let's say, with our Memorandum of Understanding that is composed of a series of reporting duties that have either an annual frequency or a biannual frequency. Every year, as our members very well know, we collect additional activities, contributions in the forms either of plans or reports from the previous years. And every 2 years, we also collect other information, the monitoring framework key performance indicators, and a series of other information that we either have through our own studies, investigations, or by asking our members. These results are very important in order to keep us all happy and on track, first of all, and to ensure that we continue this adventure of building the EOSC together. So good news, our members have been extremely responsive when reporting on additional activities, either in the planning phase and as well as in the report phase. And we know that in these years, we've collected, or actually we're either planning or we already have validated our contributions for additional activities that are really reassuring. In 2021, we have committed to 300 and almost 10 million, 300,000 euro in additional activities. In 2022, oh, sorry. Here. So, sorry. I knew this would be difficult. Coordination. In 2022, so 312,000, and in 2023, we are anticipating 300 and almost 80,000. So this is very reassuring because the partnership, this side of the partnership, the members of the association have committed to 500,000 euro, 500,000 million, sorry, and of course this is reassuring in terms of being able to achieve that target. In the monitoring framework, key performance indicators instead, the clicker. Maybe somebody else should do this. Okay, thanks. These key performance indicators are a completely different set of indicators, and they are there to allow us to see whether we are aligned with the development of the goals set in the SRIA. And the exercise also provides, let's say, a way to understand whether we are aligned with other monitoring methodologies and whether, in the end, we can build a big picture of what happens across the EOSC partnership. So we have collected information from the member base, and this is in colors. The picture that comes out in green, the achieved targets. In orange, the indicators that have an achievement between 40% and 99%, and in red, the indicators that are below target, well below target, so well below 40% of the target value. In gray, the ones that are either are not measurable or are in progress of being measured. And just because you cannot read all this, but I want to reflect just a little bit on what is red and what is green, and just so to know what is let's say, what is already achieved and what really needs attention. In red, of course, the minimum viable EOSC core function, or the EU node, or the EOSC happening really in practice. Fair assessment tools, AAI frameworks, fair and open data sets being actually deposited in repositories, the adoption of the EOSC interoperability framework by research infrastructure, the EU data spaces, the connections between European and non-European clouds for science, and in green, the things that seems to have been achieved are certainly the number and geographic spread of members within the association, the task force establishment and their disciplinary coverage, the research performing organization providing training in open science, and the establishment of stakeholder fora like this one, the cost model for transnational access, and adoption of standards and protocols for data sharing and reuse, and also the number of inter- and cross-disciplinary use cases conducted on data sharing practices using EOSC services. So we've tried to align our indicators against the steering board evaluation framework. The categories that Roberto showed earlier, those 8 categories, we've tried to fit our indicators ex post against that evaluation framework. So maybe we could have a conversation exactly on where our indicators could fit in those categories, but we've tried, and so we can see that perhaps the areas where we're doing best is in the training area. I think it's useful way to see the indicators. It gives you a better fragmentation. In the engagement process, we're not doing too badly. And whereas the infrastructure part has a mix of either achieved or partly achieved or not achieved stories. And in the services as well, some things are really functioning, like the models the cost models for transnational access, or something are really not working, like the establishment of fair assessment tools, and so on. I just want to go, perfect, thank you. The lessons learned are that we would need to maybe clarify some of the definitions that are in the monitoring framework in order for our respondents to actually understand the questions better and be better able to respond, to align the monitoring methodologies, especially with the steering board, so that we can build a bigger picture of our different surveys, and therefore align also on methodologies, for example, examples of case studies and best practices, etc. And for that, we would like to propose some terminology definitions of terms, let's say, that we could all agree on, so that we can monitor the same things and classify things in the same way, and eventually build together these stories. I guess I can just make one example in observation of time. For example, from our AAPs, we can define the virus outbreak data network, Vote in Africa, which is private funding for a network that ensures fair data in regions where this is badly needed, where virus outbreak could be extremely impactful, and allows to maintain a governance at the national level over the data, whereas at the same time making these data available for research. And I just go to the last slide to say what the next steps can be. For us, it's a matter of agreeing in the next few months. Just the last slide. Yeah, no, sorry, it's the pink one. It's okay, I can just speak. So for us, in these next 2 months, we will work with the Commission to refine the monitoring framework, come to some agreement on what the next survey would look like, what questions it should contain, and we would like very much to work together across the tripartite collaboration to ensure that we can put all this information together in one basket and build a very nice picture of what happens at this level. Thank you. Sorry for the confusion.
Thank you very much, Ilaria. I want to complete this roundtable with two new persons in the stage. And I invite Pilar Rico, that is the head of the Open Access Repositories and Scientific Journals in the Fundación para la Ciencia y la Tecnología of Spain, and Pantelis Sibiloglu, that is the policy officer at the Open Science and Research Infrastructures in the DG Research and Innovation. They are the co-chairs of the Steering Board subgroup on monitoring. Do you have 1 minute each just for your introduction? Pilar?
Thank you, Inma. This is Pilar Rico here. I've been working at the Steering Board as representing Spain during this year, together with Immaculada Figueroa, and I've been co-chairing the subgroup of monitoring with Pantelis. We have been conducting the survey for the 2022 data year, and we've been collecting the information. And by chance, I also had the role of collecting the information from the EOSC Future side, because it happens that our institution is working in EOSC Future as linked third party of openers, so we had also the role of collectors of the information and constructing the observatory. So there were some certain moments in the year in which I had to change roles from collector to validator, and I had a chance to learn a lot about the process and about the difficulties that the collection of the information had. So I'm here to share my knowledge with you and to answer the questions in this panel. Thank you very much.
Pantelis, please.
And I am Pantelis Sibiloglu. I work in the Open Science and Research Infrastructures Unit in DGRTD, European Commission. I joined the work of the monitoring subgroup of the EOSC Steering Board around March this year. I remember in the handover file of my previous colleague working on this file, the summary of what he told me is like, we are now running a survey of 100 questions to the member states, and your job is to make them reply to these questions. Good luck. And I was really surprised by the fact that there was a development and agreement on such a high number of questions at the beginning, but then as I started working in this process, in this exercise, I realized what Roberto described earlier, that there is a point in structuring the survey in this way, and even if the number of 100 questions sounds like a bit intimidating, in the end it is a survey to cover other surveys as well, to be used as a point of reference. And I was really surprised also to see the response of the member states and the associated countries in taking the effort to reply to the survey, to collect the necessary data that we need to have in order to provide the analysis that will be coming out in a few days or weeks, I hope. and where all of you will have the chance to look into the data and what we have extracted as insights from this data, and also in terms of a dashboard that will be made publicly available around the same time as the analysis under the EOSC Observatory website, where you will be able to have this visualization that Gareth mentioned earlier. So I'm very happy to be working in this group. It's a lot of work with the member states, but it's for good purpose. And I'm looking forward to this discussion. Thanks.
Okay, so go directly to answer the question. We have a complete panel that are covering all the possible answers to your questions. So the floor is open. Do you have any questions here in the audience? Please.
Hello. This is a question for the last speaker. I would like to understand a little bit the details of the particular example that you showed. You said that the survey you did was to consider a questionnaire about disease spreading. It is well known that during this period of 2020 to 2022, for about a period of 2 years, there was a very great work done by Johns Hopkins University, which collected data from the entire world and was published on a daily basis. And there were hundreds, perhaps thousands of scientific publications that used the data of Johns Hopkins. So my question is, in the survey that you did you take this into account as an example? What added value does the survey that you present and similar surveys in the EOSC provide to data that several institutions put out or put up in the community and many scientists are using? Thank you.
Thanks a lot for the question. And I think he's referring to the Vodan example. We can only, let's say, showcase for the moment what we are aware of and what comes through our exercises of surveying the members' activities. And therefore, anything that is outside this domain, maybe not exactly under our eyes, but certainly any demonstration of the importance of sharing information openly and having an impact at the societal level is a very welcome example to be showcased. And the EOSC initiative does not end at the territory limits of the association. Certainly, it's a much wider effort, and it is our interest to know about these initiatives. We are certainly limited in terms of ability to monitor an even broader landscape than what we already have under our responsibility. But information in this respect will be very welcome, and if we could connect, I would be happy to find a way to bring it into a bigger light.
Thank you. Next question. Yes.
Good morning. Begging your pardon for my English. When you talk about open science at advanced monitoring, are usages of the marketplace site taken account or not?
Got it? To answer?
Are you asking if we monitor the marketplace or if we use the data from the marketplace for the survey? If we're monitoring it. So for some, we did not go into all the questions, of course. So Roberta didn't pull up all 104 questions. But one of the questions there is related to services offered through EOSC. Another one is repositories connected to EOSC. And the idea is to use, at least for now, the services that are onboarded in the marketplace to collect that data. Now, of course, looking forward in the future, we'll have to see which data source to use, but at least for some of the questions, we collect from the marketplace. We also collect other, let's say, external data, such as the number of RPOs. We collect from Eurostat, and of course, the member states can check and agree. I won't go into the Eurostat data, sometimes it's preliminary. We also collect data from the Open Science Observatory, specifically on open access publications with a definition, open data sets, and software sets. We would like to collect information on fair data sets, but we're not there yet in terms of the definition and where that data would be collected. And even between the data we're already collecting, there's different levels of confidence, let's say. So the number of publications in open access from the graph is quite high, but then when you come to open data sets and software sets, then you see the numbers radically decrease, and we know that's not collecting all of what's out there. So as Roberto said, it's an iterative process, not just in terms of the questions, not that we would necessarily adjust questions, but the clarification of what is meant and understood in the questions and on the data sources, external data sources especially, that are coming in. The main idea was to collect as much external data, automatically harvest and ingest it into the tool as possible, so that when steering board members go through the survey, they're presented with a number coming from a trusted data source, and then they can click, yes, I agree, no, I agree, this is why, or this is the number.
Thank you. Let's give the possibility to the audience. We have some questions additional here. Okay.
Thank you, Ivan. It's more of the comment. I think for a long, long time I'm advocating not using surveys because it's human dependent, and two different persons from the same ministry, from the same country, will probably feel differently the data, which we can collect from the very reliable sources. In our example, from my country, we are forcing the use of Research Information System, CRIS, which is basically the point where all information, validated information about research in Croatia should be placed. And then instead of humans, we should develop on a European scale, probably with the cooperation with the EuroCRIS or CRIS system, national CRIS system, machine actionable survey, and something which is in real time, weather maps, not dependent on the very complicated, strong, human demanding efforts, which we are advocating from time to time, constantly over the different EC programs, EU projects, and usually this monitoring system end up with a project, and it's waste of our time and waste of resources, human resources. And there is not reliable sources which probably make lots of damage to many of us instead of helping us to be a reliable source, because we are all dealing with a knowledge pyramid where we should act, or I should come to my politicians and said you should act based on the information collected from reliable data. And if data is not reliable, then we are all in the wrong train. So my question is, when we should, or when the EC, or when we as a community should start something doing with the CRIS cooperation among these countries? Thank you.
Thank you.
I will take this one. I fully agree with you that collecting the information through a survey that is human-based answers is very difficult. We didn't really agree on what we meant about the specific, very basic concepts, even though those that have been defined in the official manuals, like Frascati manual. So when collecting the basic information, we found very uneven numbers and very difficult to understand numbers. Difficulties got even worse when it came to funding. That has been one of the most complicated items to address because of double counting in most of the cases, because as Roberto was saying, because the lack of counting of a specific funding towards open science. But I want to add something to your reflection, which is validation. The validation mechanism has been also human-based. And it has been on the members of the steering board plate. And some of us had our own opinion on our national data, and we had opinions on those data that were not straightforward, like use cases, for instance. So the collection, the writing of the survey, the questions, The collection of the information that in the case of Ireland, as Roberto was saying, was on a federated manner. We did it that way, on a federated manner, but more based on our informal contacts through national nodes of distributing information, but it was based on what we knew within the steering board national delegation, and together with Ignacio, that he was helping us as member of the directors of the association. So collecting the information, interpreting the information, and validating the information. So for me, the main purpose of this survey and this exercise of monitoring is that we as member states are aware that EOSC is there somehow, and for us to start putting dimensions to what EOSC is in our countries. Might be wrong dimensions, but we are thinking in EOSC as something that we have to think about. In my understanding, it's a kind of policy similar to the one launched by the European Commission with the data management plan. At the beginning, data management plan were like, what is this? And what I tend to explain to our research community was, this is an exercise for you to think about data as a research output. So this is kind of the same. It's not, the purpose is not to get the number, the final number, or the final real picture. But the final purpose for me, in my understanding, is to force member states to sit down and give it a thought, a serious one, in terms of dimensions to the EOSC effort. Thanks.
Very clear. Pilar.
Sorry, I just want to also the comment there. Even I fully agree. Having CRIS systems deployed in every country in a consistent way, so we can get the data out of the CRIS systems, is an excellent vision. It's a long-term vision, though, in my view. What I see in Ireland, for example, is that not many universities deploy CRIS systems, and where they are deployed, the uptake, the information that's put into them, is very limited at the moment. So a very low percentage of researchers put their data into the CRIS systems, right, at the moment. So that's going to take some time to get to a point where we get out of CRIS systems reliable information, I think.
You want to add something, Pantelis?
Just a minor. I mean, I fully agree with what colleagues already said. I mean, in terms of at least the level of the survey fatigue that was mentioned, and the number of questions, and the fact that there is a human effort that needs to put in place in order to reply to the survey every year. One measure that we have taken is to agree that we will be pre-filling the questions of the next year with the answers of the previous year, because many of these questions are not questions that will be changing from year to year. For example, if you have a policy on open science, for most of the countries will not change from one year to the other. So then, by doing this measure, of course, the respondents to the survey will still have to go through the questions to make any necessary updates. But nevertheless, we hope that some of this fatigue, some of this burden will be reduced by taking this measure. Of course, in the long term, as Roberto said, we are also having a work stream of automatizing as much as possible those questions that can be currently automatized, like the number of researchers where we extract the data automatically from Eurostat, or the number of open access publications that we extract from OpenAir research graph, and hopefully in the future also other questions can be done in the same way. But currently, we feel that this is the level of automatization that we can employ in the system.
I would like to complete from the point of view of Spain. Spain has established a system of information science and technology, and the problem is that the system needs to be aligned, because when you want to explore the information that we have there to answer the surveys, it's not a direct answer. We have to try to combine several indicators in order to answer. So I think that we have to do also an exercise at European and national level in order to align these systems for having this automatization that you are requiring, in order to avoid, in some cases, have to go through the steering board, in this case, steering board members. Thank you. Okay, is there any further question in the audience? No? So in this case, I want to launch a question, and I would like to, if you can answer me, how trustworthy is the data being collected? That is something that is really important. Who wants to address this question? Got it?
Could you repeat the question?
How how trustworthy is the data being collected?
Okay,
Surveys.
yeah. So I just hate to double check there. So it's come up. It has come up a couple of times that this, and it comes back to what Yvonne was talking about. So I think the approach was taken, and correct me if I'm wrong, was that we start with this monitoring framework. We have these categories that we feel are important for EOSC and Open Science, and we identify key questions that the member states themselves want to ask. These questions were collected and adjusted from the member state representatives, including you. And the idea was to ask the questions, put out the pilot, and then see, are they the right questions? Do we use the right terminologies? The tool is subsidiary there, right? You're checking the tool, but in reality, you're really checking the questions. And you're checking, can we get the data automatically externally? That proved difficult, by the way, to integrate, harvest, and so forth. And is the data that's being collected good data? Are we getting near where we want? And what was clear from the first pilot was that we would need to go through this iteratively over a number of years. So the second survey, the one that's running now, is in essence almost a second pilot because it's the new monitoring framework built on the first questions, but still in this stage of trying to come to a common understanding. So in my view, and I'm not sure of the timeline here, but we will need to go through a number of iterations more so that the clarifications and common understandings of the questions come closer together. We do see some disparity in the understanding of the question and thus in the responses, such as what is an RPO, something that was initially taken for granted, but now looking at all the question responses and the comments, we see that it's actually not really the same understanding across all member states. For the data itself, I think it's the same. As Roberto said, for financial investments, there's most likely under-reporting. Member states want to be clear on the terminologies, they want to be clear on the contributions. So there, over time, we expect also the data to get better. Now, for the automatic collection, in a way, this survey will hopefully nudge towards that direction. So now that the member states are thinking about these questions, are thinking about what the terminologies mean, and are collecting the data, then they can start perhaps working towards how to automate that data, automate the data. Let's take the question on data stewards. How many data stewards are there in your country in FTEs? Well, first of all, you have to understand what a data steward is. You have to check, are they actually in place within the institutions, and then try and track the FTEs. Most likely that will need to be done now through internal surveys. Some countries are more advanced than others, but possibly in the future, that could also be taken into maybe a CRIS system and then feed into the observatory. So it's trustworthy to an extent right now. There's a disclaimer, by the way, on the observatory tool that this is a best guess estimate for now, and this is working iterations. But I think over time it will become more and more commonly understood and trustworthy.
I fully agree with what you just said, Gareth, and I wanted to complement that. Following the same process that we have been following, taking data from official sources like Eurostat, I do believe that one of our purposes on a medium-term time would be to include these questions related to open science, like the one Gareth was referring about data stewardship, within the national surveys of R&D. So we will be able to collect reliable information through the official statistics bodies in each country. So not only be benefiting from those statistical bodies, but also including our questions there for them to enlarge what they understand by the R&D system. Because what I see is that these definitions and these questions were written and decided quite a long time ago, and now the open science paradigm has come, but no common definitions have been agreed among the community, and we are on the sides of the official definitions and the official counting. If we get ourselves into the official counting, then we will have more reliable numbers.
Thank you, Pilar. Thank you, Pilar. This is what I wanted to say. You should say better than me. Any further questions from the audience? Okay, so I will, if this works, I will launch a last question. We have had opportunity during the panel to see the two exercises that are running in parallel. And my question is, how far are we from realizing a single joint monitoring system? And what is hindering the process? Who wants to take the question?
That's a difficult one.
And to DC. Okay, so I guess the single joint monitoring system is advocated by all of us, I would say. We're all on the same page on this. We would all like to realize it. And what is hindering the process, or where are we at in that process? We started now almost 2.5 years ago, and started as the association started to interact with EOSC Future to try and test, use the tool that they were developing to run our surveys. At the time, there were possibly other priorities. The steering board also was at the same time preparing their first survey, and so there was a lot of attention towards them, rightfully so. And I think in that moment for us was also spinning up the activities, and so a lot of efforts were going in separate ways towards monitoring. And now we are at a very good point. I think the observatory is a very good tool, and we would very much like to use it because it would, there are two good things about the observatory. One is that it's a survey tool. And that helps both relieving the burden on the respondents as well as on the persons that are actually putting the survey together. Because also, going back to what we were saying earlier, the burden is not only on the persons responding, but also on the persons preparing the survey. We have two FTEs, two persons working full-time on the monitoring, plus a work package in a project to support that effort. So the effort is also on this side. The tool that EOSC Future has prepared certainly could support alleviating that burden. And the other part is the display of what is the information collected. And maybe that part is easier to mimic, but certainly the aggregation of data is relevant and could go in one container. And in that respect, not only we need the observatory, but we also need to align methodologies and perspectives. So the tool for us would be very welcome to be used, and I learned today that everything is available publicly, and perhaps we could spend some time in the very near future to try and test and see if we can use the tool on our own. Because if that could be possible, I think we could really come to that moment when we realize the single joint monitoring system.
Thank you. Please, Pantelis.
Just very briefly, I guess.
Yes.
Yeah, I fully agree with Hilaria. We were in a pilot phase, one way or another. There was the first year of the EOSC Steering Board survey, and the second year was completely different than the one of the first year. So we were still kind of consolidating the way that the EOSC Steering Board survey would look like. And I understand that also from the EOSC Association, the first years were really ramping up their survey mechanisms. So I think now it is the right time to start thinking about how the systems can align. Of course, always within the boundary conditions that they serve slightly different purposes. When we are asking the national contributions of countries to the EOSC system, it's not the same type of questions necessarily than what the EOSC Association will be looking for to get the input from the communities at the level of institutions. So observing these distinct roles that the surveys have, for sure there is a purpose in making a joint mechanism, if not least for visibility purposes. If an interested person wants to have a look at what is being collected around EOSC, it's better that this person could go to a single website and have an overview of all different parties, even if that's not a single survey, but it's a collection of different surveys. And I think we're working in this direction. Now we are starting the discussions of how the next round of survey should look like. And the EOSC Association is fully engaged in this discussion, and we're hoping to get this alignment happening for the next year.
So with this, we conclude this session. I have to thank you, the five of you, first for the hard work that you are doing to putting in place the mechanisms for the monitoring that is essential for proving the added value of EOSC, and therefore your clarity in your presentation and all the audience for the participation with your questions. Thank you very much.
Any coffee, so if we could have a quick comfort break and then start the session in about 3 minutes' time, and then we keep to time for the real coffee break.